What if I told you that the person you trusted most in this world, the one you'd die for, was slowly killing you from the inside? What if your own family became your greatest enemy, disguised as love? My name is Aisha, and this is the story of how I almost sacrificed everything, my dreams, my health, my very life, for a lie that nearly destroyed me. This is a story about manipulation, family loyalty, and the moment I had to choose between saving someone else or saving myself. If you've ever felt trapped by family expectations, if you've ever questioned whether blood really is thicker than water, then you need to hear this story. Because sometimes, the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. But before I dive into this painful journey, if you're someone who values stories of empowerment and standing up for yourself, please hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you're going to want to follow this channel for more stories like this one. Let me paint you a picture of who I was before everything changed. My name is Aisha, I'm 24 years old, and I've always been what you might call the invisible child in my family. While my older sister Jasmine was breaking records on the track team and collecting scholarship offers like Pokemon cards, I was in my bedroom with paint-stained fingers, dreaming of art galleries and exhibitions that felt a million miles away from our small apartment in Detroit. You know how every family has roles? Jasmine was the golden child, the star athlete, the one who made our parents' eyes light up whenever she walked into a room. Me? I was the supportive little sister, the one who cheered from the sidelines, the one who was expected to understand why Jasmine's needs always came first. Don't get me wrong, I loved my sister. I really did. Growing up, she was my hero. I remember being 7 years old, watching her win her first track meet, thinking she was invincible. She had this confidence, this magnetic personality that drew people to her like moths to a flame. Everyone loved Jasmine. But somewhere along the way, I started to disappear. Family dinners became about Jasmine's latest achievement. School events meant my parents rushing to her competitions while I took the bus home alone. Even my art, something I poured my soul into, became secondary to whatever Jasmine needed. I told myself it was okay. I told myself that's just how families work. Someone has to be the star, and someone has to be the support system. I accepted my role because I thought that's what love looked like. I had no idea that this dynamic was setting me up for the biggest manipulation of my life. I had no idea that my willingness to stay in the shadows would almost cost me everything. It was a typical Sunday evening in March when my world started to crumble. We were having one of our monthly family dinners. You know, the kind where everyone pretends everything is perfect while tensions simmer just beneath the surface. Jasmine had been quieter than usual lately. The invincible sister I knew was looking tired, worn down. She'd been complaining about feeling sick, missing training sessions, and for the first time in her life, her performance was slipping. But being Jasmine, she brushed off everyone's concerns with that trademark smile of hers. Our parents, though? They were worried sick. Mom kept fussing over her, making her special meals, driving her to different doctors. Dad, who usually worked late, started coming home early just to check on her. The entire household revolved around Jasmine's health, and honestly, I was getting tired of it. I know that sounds terrible. Your sister is sick, and you're annoyed about the attention she's getting? But you have to understand, this was my entire life. Even when Jasmine was struggling, she was still the center of everything. After dinner, I was in the kitchen washing dishes, because of course that was my job. When I heard my parents talking in hushed tones in the living room. Now, I'm not usually one to eavesdrop, but something about their tone made me pause. What I heard next changed everything. The doctor says Jasmine needs a kidney transplant. My mother's voice was shaking. Soon. And Aisha. Aisha might be her only hope. I stood there, soapy plate in my hands, feeling like the world had just shifted off its axis. A kidney transplant? My kidney? When had this become about me? I wanted to march in there and demand answers, but something held me back. Maybe it was the fear in my mother's voice, or maybe it was the years of conditioning that taught me to stay quiet when the adults were talking. So I listened. She has to agree to it, my father said. We can't force her, but she has to understand that Jasmine's life depends on this. What if she says no? Mom asked. She won't, Dad replied with a certainty that chilled me. Aisha's a good girl. She'll do the right thing for her sister. The right thing. As if I had no choice in the matter. As if my body, my future, my dreams were all just resources to be used for Jasmine's benefit. I finished those dishes in a daze, my mind racing with questions I was too afraid to ask. How long had they known? How long had they been planning to ask me to literally give up a piece of myself for Jasmine? But that was just the beginning. Because what happened next would test everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and love. The next morning, they cornered me. Not literally, but that's how it felt. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee and sketchbook, trying to lose myself in a drawing, when both my parents sat down across from me with those serious expressions that usually meant I was in trouble. Aisha, honey, Mom started, reaching across to touch my hand. We need to talk to you about something important. And just like that, my normal Tuesday morning became the day my family asked me to sacrifice my body for my sister. They laid it all out for me. Jasmine's kidneys were failing. The doctors said she needed a transplant within the next few months or, well, they didn't say or else, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. Family members are always the best matches, they explained. And since our parents were too old and had health issues of their own, that left me. It's a routine procedure, Dad assured me. People live normal lives with one kidney all the time. You'd be saving your sister's life. Normal life. As if having major surgery and losing an organ was just a minor inconvenience. As if my dreams of traveling, of maybe studying art in Europe, of having the freedom to live my life on my terms didn't matter. But here's the thing about being conditioned your whole life to be the supportive one. You don't immediately recognize manipulation when it's wrapped in family love. You don't see the guilt trip coming when it's disguised as a medical emergency. I asked for time to think about it. Just time. And you know what my mother said? Time? Aisha, your sister is dying. What is there to think about? What was there to think about? Oh, I don't know. Maybe the fact that I was 24 years old and had never made a single major decision about my own life? Maybe the fact that this was my body they were discussing like community property? Maybe the fact that nobody had even asked me how I felt about potentially facing major surgery? But I didn't say any of that. Because good daughters don't talk back. Good sisters don't hesitate when family needs them. Good girls sacrifice themselves without question. So I said I'd think about it. The next few days were intense. Suddenly, everyone in our extended family knew about Jasmine's condition and my potential solution to it. Aunts called to tell me how proud they were of me for considering such a selfless act. Cousins texted about what a good sister I was. Our pastor even pulled me aside after service to talk about the biblical meaning of sacrifice. It was like the entire world had decided for me before I'd even made a decision. Like my consent was just a formality in a plan that was already set in motion. And then came the guilt. I don't understand why you need time to think about this, Jasmine said to me one evening. We were in her room, and she looked so small in her bed, surrounded by pill bottles and medical equipment. If it were reversed, I wouldn't hesitate to save you. That hit me like a physical blow. Because maybe she was right. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe a good sister would have said yes immediately. I'm scared, I admitted. It was the first time I'd been honest about my feelings since this whole nightmare started. You're scared. Jasmine's voice rose. Aisha, I'm the one who might die. You're scared of a little surgery. A little surgery. Like it was nothing. Like my fears, my concerns, my bodily autonomy meant nothing compared to her needs. But I agreed to go to the medical consultation. I figured I owed it to everyone to at least get all the information before making my decision. I thought maybe talking to the doctor would help me feel more confident about the procedure. I had no idea that this consultation would reveal a truth that would shatter everything I believed about my family, my sister, and this entire situation. Because what the doctor told me next didn't just change my mind about the surgery, it changed my mind about everything. Dr. Martinez was a kind woman with gentle eyes and a no-nonsense way of speaking. She walked me through the procedure, the risks, the recovery time. Everything seemed standard until I asked a question that changed everything. "Doctor," I said, "can you tell me more about how Jasmine's kidneys got to this point? I mean, she's young and athletic. How does someone her age develop kidney failure?" The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Martinez looked uncomfortable, glancing between me and my parents, who had insisted on being in the room. "Well," she said carefully, "kidney failure in young adults can have various causes. In your sister's case, there were several contributing factors." She paused again, and I could see her choosing her words carefully. "What kind of factors?" I pressed. "Primarily, the damage appears to be related to prolonged use of certain substances, combined with dehydration and poor management of existing health conditions." Substances. My heart started pounding. What kind of substances? Pain medications, primarily. And there's evidence of other drug use that has impacted kidney function over time. The room went silent. I looked at my parents, who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Jasmine, who was staring at her hands. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "Based on the medical history and test results, I'd estimate the damage has been accumulating for at least 2 to 3 years. 2 to 3 years. While I was working part-time jobs to pay for art supplies, while I was getting rejected from galleries, while I was living in my sister's shadow and feeling guilty for wanting more, she was destroying her body with drugs. So this isn't some random illness? This isn't bad luck or genetics. This is because of choices she made. Aisha, my mother started. It's more complicated than that, is it?" I cut her off, something I'd never done in my life. "Because it sounds like you've been asking me to give up my kidney to fix a problem that Jasmine caused." "It's not that simple," Jasmine said, tears in her eyes. "I got hurt track training and the pain was so bad. The doctors prescribed medication, and then things just got out of hand. I never meant for it to go this far. And there it was. The truth wrapped in just enough victimhood to make me feel guilty for being angry. Because that's how manipulation works, isn't it? There's always just enough truth to make you question your own feelings." "How long have you known?" I asked my parents. The silence told me everything. "How long have you known that she caused this, and you still asked me to fix it?" "Sweetheart, it doesn't matter how it happened. What matters is that she needs help now." Doesn't matter? Doesn't matter that my sister had been living recklessly while I'd been carefully planning every aspect of my life? Doesn't matter that they were asking me to solve a problem that was entirely preventable? I stood up from that chair, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never felt before in front of my family. Power. Not the power to hurt them, but the power to choose for myself. "I need to think about this," I said, and before anyone could guilt me or pressure me or remind me about family loyalty, I walked out of that office. But the revelations weren't over. Because when I got home and started really looking at the last few years of my life, I realized this wasn't the first time I'd been manipulated. This wasn't the first time my needs had been sacrificed for Jasmine's choices. And that's when I decided to do something I'd never done before. I decided to investigate the truth about my sister and my family. What I found would either destroy us, or finally set me free. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I went through Jasmine's room while she was at another doctor's appointment. I know it sounds like a violation of privacy, but I felt like I'd been living in a house of lies, and I needed to know the truth. What I found broke my heart and opened my eyes at the same time. Hidden in her dresser drawer, underneath old track ribbons and team photos, I found pill bottles. Lots of them. Some prescribed, some not. Some with her name, some with names I didn't recognize. And dates. Dates going back almost 3 years, just like the doctor had said. But it wasn't just the pills. I found texts on her old phone, the one she claimed was broken, but was actually just hidden. Messages about buying pills, about covering up positive drug tests, about lying to coaches and doctors and family. And then I found something that made me sit down hard on her bed, a conversation with her friend Marcus from 8 months ago. Marcus, your parents still don't know? Jasmine, are you crazy? If they knew I caused this, they'd kill me. Better to let them think it's just bad luck. Marcus, but what about Aisha? You're really going to let her give up her kidney? Jasmine. She'll do it. She always does what's best for the family. Besides, people live fine with one kidney. I sat there staring at those words until they blurred through my tears. She always does what's best for the family. Like I was just a resource to be used. Like my willingness to sacrifice for others was something to exploit rather than appreciate. But I kept digging because I needed to know how deep this went. And what I found was a pattern that stretched back years. Remember when I couldn't afford art school because our family needed money for Jasmine's training expenses? Those expenses included drugs. Remember when I gave up my part-time job to drive Jasmine to important meetings with scouts? Some of those meetings were actually trips to buy pills from dealers. I had been unknowingly enabling her addiction while sacrificing my own dreams, and now they wanted me to literally give up a piece of my body to save her from the consequences of her choices. The next morning, I confronted her. I know, I said simply, walking into her room and dropping the pill bottles on her bed. She didn't even try to deny it at first. She just looked at me with those big, sad eyes and said, Aisha, I can explain. Can you? I asked. Can you explain why you let me believe this was some random illness? Can you explain why you let our parents ask me to donate my kidney without telling them the truth? And then she pulled out every manipulation tactic in the book. She cried. She talked about how addiction is a disease. She reminded me of all the times she'd protected me when we were kids. She talked about how much she loved me, how she never meant for things to go this far. But here's the thing about the truth. Once you see it clearly, it's hard to unsee it. And I was seeing everything clearly for the first time in my life. You're not asking me to save you, I said. You're asking me to enable you. You're asking me to fix a problem you created, so you don't have to face the consequences. I'm asking my sister to save my life, she shouted. No, I said, and my voice was steadier than it had ever been. You're asking your sister to sacrifice her life to cover up your lies. That's when she played her final card. The one I should have seen coming, but somehow didn't. If you don't do this, she said, tears streaming down her face, and something happens to me. You'll have to live with that for the rest of your life. You'll know that you could have saved me and chose not to. And for a moment, just a moment, I almost fell for it again. Because that's how powerful a lifetime of conditioning can be. That's how deep the guilt runs when you've been taught that your value lies in what you can do for others. But then I remembered something Dr. Martinez had said. There are other options for kidney donations. Family isn't the only possibility. Jasmine could get on a donor list. She could explore other medical options. She could, for the first time in her life, take responsibility for her situation and work toward a solution that didn't require me to sacrifice everything. And that's when I made the decision that would change my life forever. I called a family meeting. Not the kind where I sat quietly while others made decisions about my life, but the kind where I stood up and spoke my truth. My parents, Jasmine, and I sat in our living room, the same room where I'd overheard them planning my future without consulting me. But this time, I wasn't hiding in the kitchen. This time, I was front and center. I know about the drugs, I said without preamble. All of it. The pills, the lying, the way this whole situation was created. The silence was deafening. Mom started to speak, but I held up my hand. For 24 years, I have made my life smaller so that Jasmine's could be bigger. I've set aside my dreams, my needs, my wants, because I was taught that's what family does. I was taught that love means sacrifice, and I believed it. But this isn't love. This is manipulation. And I'm done. Aisha, my father started, You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I cut him off. I understand that you've asked me to donate my kidney to fix a problem that could have been prevented. I understand that none of you thought I deserved to know the whole truth before making a decision about my own body. I understand that my dreams, my health, my future have always been secondary to Jasmine's wants. I turned to my sister, this person I'd looked up to my entire life, and I saw her clearly for the first time. Jasmine, you had choices. Every day for 3 years, you had choices. You chose drugs over health. You chose lies over honesty. You chose to put your family through this crisis rather than seek help when it could have made a difference. I was in pain, she whispered. So was I said. I've been in pain my whole life, living in your shadow, making myself smaller, giving up pieces of myself bit by bit. But I never asked anyone else to fix my pain for me. I never put my problems on someone else's body. I'm not donating my kidney, I said clearly. Not because I don't love you, but because I finally love myself enough to say no. The explosion was immediate. My mother started crying, talking about how disappointed she was in me. My father accused me of being selfish, of abandoning family when they needed me most. And Jasmine looked at me like I'd just sentenced her to death. But I didn't back down. For the first time in my life, I stood in that storm of disapproval and guilt and stayed steady. There are other options, I said. Jasmine can get on the donor list. She can explore other medical treatments. She can get help for her addiction and work toward a solution that doesn't require someone else to sacrifice their body. What if there isn't time? My mother demanded. What if she dies while waiting for another donor? I took a deep breath and said the hardest words I'd ever spoken. Then that's a consequence of her choices, not mine. I won't set myself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when they're the one who started the fire. The silence that followed was different from all the other silences in our house. This one wasn't filled with unspoken expectations or hidden resentments. This one was filled with truth, raw and uncomfortable and liberating. My parents left the room without another word. Jasmine looked at me for a long moment, and I thought I saw something new in her eyes. Maybe respect, maybe fear, maybe just the recognition that I wasn't the same person who had walked into that room. I never meant for it to go this far, she said quietly. I know, I replied. But it did. And now we both have to live with the consequences of our choices. That night, I packed a bag and went to stay with my friend Maya. I needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out who I was when I wasn't defined by my relationship to Jasmine. And for the first time in my life, I started planning a future that was entirely my own. That was 6 months ago. 6 months since I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive choices. 6 months since I discovered that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. Jasmine did get help. After I refused to donate, our parents finally faced the truth about her addiction. She entered a treatment program, got on the kidney donor list, and started taking responsibility for her health for the first time in years. She's doing better. Not just physically, but emotionally too. Our relationship is different now. There's honesty where there used to be manipulation. There's respect where there used to be expectation. It's not the fairy tale family reconciliation you see in movies, but it's real, and it's healthier than anything we had before. As for me, I'm thriving in ways I never thought possible. I moved into my own apartment, small, but entirely mine. I'm working part-time at a local gallery while building my portfolio. I've started setting boundaries in all areas of my life, and it's amazing how much energy you have when you're not constantly managing other people's emotions. I learned that family loyalty shouldn't come at the cost of your own well-being. I learned that love isn't measured by how much you're willing to sacrifice, but by how willing you are to be honest and authentic. I learned that saying no to someone else's crisis doesn't make you selfish, it makes you responsible for your own life. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're the one who always gives, always compromises, always makes yourself smaller, I want you to know that you have choices. You have power. You have the right to prioritize your own dreams, your own health, your own future. It's not easy to break patterns that have been established over a lifetime. It's not easy to disappoint people you love. But sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is save yourself. I still paint. Every day, actually. But now I paint from a place of joy rather than escape. I paint because I choose to, not because it's the only space I'm allowed to occupy. And my art has never been more vibrant, more honest, more alive. Your story doesn't have to be my story, but your ending can be just as empowering. You get to choose who you want to be and what you're willing to accept. You get to decide where your boundaries are and how you want to be treated. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for giving me a space to share this truth. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to this channel and share your own stories of empowerment in the comments. Let's create a community of people who choose themselves, who set boundaries, and who know that they're worthy of love without sacrifice. Remember, you are not responsible for fixing other people's problems, especially when they're the ones who created them. You are responsible for living your own life with intention, integrity, and self-respect.